The Chicago Blackhawks were ranked as the second best prospect pool in the NHL, but also the second worst current NHL salary cap position. I'll dive into why one is a fair assessment and why one is completely wrong.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and check me out on X at Jack Bushman2, but make sure to follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Go and show some love to Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram as well. As I mentioned yesterday, I've gotten that account up and running once again here over the last couple of weeks, posting some cool Blackhawks-related content, reels, and stories on over there. So make sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram as well. I greatly appreciate all of your support. But to open things up on today's show, Blackhawks fans, Corey Pronman of The Athletic has been releasing his NHL pipelines rankings here over the last month, and our Chicago Blackhawks wound up coming in at number 2. So definitely wanted to react to that, as well as how Pronman has the Blackhawks top 15 prospects in the organization rated out from 1 to 15, and also dive into whether I think the Blackhawks deserve to be the second best prospect pool in the entire NHL. Real quick though, before getting into the rankings, I do want to mention that Pronman included every player under the age of 22 years old. Or 22 years old or younger, I should say, as of September 15th, 2025. So this list includes basically every player selected between the 2021 and 2025 NHL draft. So even though Connor Bedard has been a full-time NHLer the last 2 years, maybe not considered a prospect any longer in most folks' eyes, he is a part of this list for Corey Pronman, as is, Macklin Celebrini for the San Jose Sharks, Dylan Guenther, Logan Cooley for the Utah Mammoth, Yuri Slafkovsky for the Montreal Canadiens, and so on and so forth. So that is definitely something I wanted to make you all aware of before fully going into this list. But at number 1 in Corey Pronman's NHL pipelines rankings is no longer the Chicago Blackhawks. Some of you probably remember this time last year, Pronman did in fact have the Blackhawks ranked number 1. As I mentioned, they're now here at number 2. The San Jose Sharks are the ones who eclipsed the Blackhawks for this top spot. They were number 2 last year, interestingly enough. So just flip-flopping number 1 and number 2, according to Pronman. And the top most noteworthy prospects in the Sharks organization, 22 years old or younger, are, of course, Macklin Celebrini, first overall pick in 2024. Then Michael Misa, the second overall selection in 2025, as well as Sam Dickinson, Will Smith, Victor Eklund, Igor Chernyshov, who they took with the first overall pick in the second round last year. Joshua Ravensbergen was a first round selection last year. Philip Bysted, Leo Saline Valenius, Quentin Musty. They got a lot of noteworthy prospects in their pipelines, as well as a lot of star level players in the making at the top end, Macklin Celebrini and Michael Misa. And I really do believe and agree with Pronman's assessment here that with the addition of Misa to this prospect pool from the 2025 draft class, I do agree that this now makes San Jose the top prospect pool in the entire NHL. The Blackhawks, though, I do believe deserve to be right behind them at number 2. And how Pronman had them ranked from number 1 to 15 here real quick. Connor Bedard obviously kicks things off at number 1. Artem Levshinov, interestingly, is number 2. I've discussed many times here in the last couple of months how I think it's pretty clear if Bedard's a part of the rankings, there's a clear-cut top 3 behind him, and Artem Levshinov, Anton Frondel, and Sam Rinzel. Some people just kind of grade those people a little bit differently. Pronman has Levshinov as the number 2 prospect in the Blackhawks organization. Anton Frondel comes in at number 3. Frank Nazar, of course, still considered a prospect as part of this rankings. He comes in at number 4. What I found fascinating is that Corey Pronman had Kevin Korchinski ranked at number 5 ahead of Sam Rinzel at number 6. This is the first Blackhawks-related prospect list I've broken down here this summer that still had Kevin Korchinski ahead of Sam Rinzel. So that is definitely something to point out. However, obviously Pronman is in charge of a lot of teams, every NHL team's prospects list, and is having a lot of different prospects on his mind at all times. So I give him the benefit of the doubt in terms of these rankings more often than not. And you also got to remember this time last year, Pronman didn't even think Frank Nazar was a top 150 prospect in the entire NHL. So things can definitely change. You got to take these rankings a little bit with a grain of salt because he has such a body of work on his hands. But thought it was definitely interesting to see Kevin Korchinski come in at number 5, Sam Rinzel at 6. Love to see Sasha Boisvert at 7. That's where I'd have him ranked as well, right ahead of Oliver Moore at 8. Mason West comes in at number 9 for Corey Pronman. Then Colton Dachs at 10, Roman Kanserov 11, Nolan Allen 12, Ryan Green 13, Marek Vanacker 14, and Vaslav Nestrasil comes in at number 15, while Nick Lardis, Nathan Bem, Stanislav Bereznoi, Ethan Del Mastro, John Mustard, and AJ Spellacy were players Pronman also gave a shout out to here as well. I would say Roman Kanserov, I think, probably deserves to be a couple spots higher considering how well he's fared in the KHL at a young age. I'd probably have Marek Vanacker up a couple of spots, and same probably with Nick Lardis, as you all know from my summer 2025 Blackhawks prospect rankings. But how I would probably change things up here at the top, I'd probably have Frank Nazar in the number 2 spot. I know you all are aware how highly I think of this kid. That would probably go to show you just how high and bright of a future I believe Frank Nazar has in store. I would probably have him at 2. I would go with Sam Rinzel at 3, then Anton Frondel at 4, Artem Levshinov at 5 for me personally, but I do recognize it's all really close there after Connor Bedard. But just given the amount of bodies, the depth of this Blackhawks prospect pool, I really do still believe they have the deepest prospect pool in the entire NHL with the sheer number of players that legitimately have a chance to be NHL puzzle pieces here. But I don't think they have necessarily the upside or the star power that the San Jose Sharks now possess with Macklin Celebrini, Michael Misa, Sam Dickinson, and Will Smith. That's a real big core 4 of the future for the San Jose Sharks, and some pretty good bodies alongside them as well. So I do agree San Jose deserves to have the top spot at number 1 this year, but I really believe the Blackhawks are properly ranked as well here by Corey Pronman with the 2nd-best prospect pool in the NHL, and in my mind, undoubtedly the deepest. At number 3, Corey Pronman had the Utah Mammoth, who were previously ranked number 7, led by Dylan Gunther and Logan Cooley, who I mentioned a moment ago. They selected Caleb Desnoyers in the 2025 NHL draft. Then they also got high-level guys like Tija Ginla, Dmitry Simashev, Daniil Boot, Michael Harabel, Cole Baudouin was also a first-round selection not all that long ago. So a lot of talent here for the Utah Mammoth at 3. The Anaheim Ducks are at number 4 for Corey Pronman after being ranked number 3 last year, led by Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, Beckett Seneca, and Roger McQueen. Boy, oh boy, do they have some size and skill in that forward group. Cutter Gauthier as well. And then on the back end was Stian Schulberg, Pavel Minchikov, Olin Zellweger. The latter of those two guys, kind of had some bumps in the road last year, but still very young and still reasons to believe that they can definitely turn it around as a young group together in Anaheim with a veteran and second winningest head coach of all time in Joel Quenneville. And then at number 5, Corey Pronman has the Montreal Canadiens, who were ranked 6th this time last year, led by Yuri Slavkovsky and Ivan Demidov in the forward group. Still, and this to me, Blackhawks fans, when looking at the Hawks prospect pool, yeah, it's still the deepest in the NHL in my mind, but what they're missing right here, right now is a true another offensive star along with Connor Bedard. I have high hopes for Frank Nazar. I think Anton Frondel is going to be a good player, and I think there's a lot of good puzzle pieces here in Chicago, but no one really is at the same level or close offensively and creativity wise with Connor Bedard. So to not have someone like Ivan Demidov, I think Artem Levshinov is going to be a great player, but I do believe that is going to be looked at as a miss ultimately for the Blackhawks, especially with how well Sam Rinzel has developed as a right-handed defenseman over the last year and a half. But Slavkovsky and Demidov lead the way offensively for the Canadians. Obviously, Lane Hudson on the back end. David Reinbacher, unfortunately, missed all of last season due to an injury, but they also got Zach Bolduc, Michael Hage, Owen Beck, Alexander Zarovsky was a second-round pick here this year, Jacob Fowler in net, Oliver Kapanen as well. I think Utah, Anaheim, and Montreal, it is really tough to sort between these three prospect pools in terms of ranking them after the San Jose Sharks and the Blackhawks at numbers 1 and 2. I would probably say the Utah Mammoth. I do think just with Gunther and Cooley and adding Desnoyers, and I really love Tija Ginla, and Michael Harabel has had a pretty good college career so far. Like, I would probably put Utah in that 3 spot. I think Montreal, probably just with the upside of Demidov and Hudson, I'd probably give them the edge over the Anaheim Ducks. And the defensive core of the Ducks probably doesn't look as savvy in the prospect pool as it did a year ago, considering the years that Minchikov and Zellweger had, as I mentioned. I'd probably have the Ducks at 5 personally behind the Montreal Canadiens. The Seattle Kraken are up next for Corey Pronman, led by Matty Beniers, Berkeley Catton, who I think the absolute world of. I think he's going to be an NHL all-star type of player. Shane Wright really seemed to find his footing in Seattle last year. And then, of course, they selected Jake O'Brien in the first round of the 2025 NHL draft. Seattle ranked 6th after being 9th last year. The Philadelphia Flyers come in next at number 7 after being 13th last year, led by Matvei Michkov. They added Porter Martone in this year's draft, as well as Jack Nesbitt, Oliver Bonk on the back end as well, and Jet Lutchenko, who was, I believe, 12th or 13th overall in the 2024 draft class. Then the Columbus Blue Jackets come in at number 8 after previously being ranked 4th last year. Adam Fantilli and Kent Johnson. Boy, did Kent Johnson really cement himself as a core piece of the Blue Jackets last season. Major year for him. Adam Fantilli, still a young man as well, who has really elevated or found himself to be a super high floor type of player. Jackson Smith, big left-handed defenseman added in the draft this year. Caden Lindstrom is the real wild card of this draft class and probably are the 2024 draft class now, and why Columbus dipped a little bit in terms of their ranking here this year, considering he was off the ice all of last season due to a back injury. But we know what the kid looks like when he is healthy. Hopefully he'll be able to put a full season together here this year. Then they also still have Cole Sillinger and Denton Matachuk, both 22 years old or younger at this point in time as well. Honestly, I'd probably give the Columbus Blue Jackets the edge over the Seattle Kraken. I'd probably have Philadelphia and Columbus ahead of Seattle personally, even though I do love both Matty Beniers and Berkeley Catton. At number 9, the New York Islanders, after being ranked 25th this time last year. And that's what happens when you have like 3 of the top 21 picks, I believe, in the 2025 draft, led by Matthew Schaefer, Victor Eklund, and Kashawn Aitchison. Those 3 top 20, top 21 selections lead the prospect pool now for the Islanders in their rebuild, as well as Callum Ritchie, Danny Nelson, Daniil Prokhorov, and then Cole Iserman, who's going to be teammates with Blackhawks prospect Sasha Boisvert at Boston University this fall. And then at number 10, rounding things out for Corey Pronman, is the Nashville Predators, led by Brady Martin. They still have David Edstrom as well that they acquired in a trade with Vegas, Tanner Molendijk, Cameron Reed, Igor Shurin, Matthew Wood. Gives them a pretty solid prospect pool as well. Honestly, I'd probably have the Detroit Red Wings or maybe even the Buffalo Sabres, although I still feel like the Sabres prospect pool lacks upside. I don't think there's a ton of upside in this Nashville Predators prospect pool as well. I think the Carolina Hurricanes have a sneaky good prospect pool for a team that's, contending as frequently as they are right here, right now. But I do think undoubtedly the top 5 prospect pools in the NHL in my mind, when considering all players 22 years old or younger as of September 15th of this year. San Jose Sharks, I do firmly believe, deserve to have that number 1 spot. Our Chicago Blackhawks, with the deepest prospect pool in the NHL, I have them right behind San Jose at number 2. Utah, Anaheim, and Montreal, all really promising futures as well. I think they fill up the 3, 4, and 5 spot I think Corey Pronman did a really solid job with this ranking overall in terms of breaking down the teams, and goes to show once again why the Chicago Blackhawks have such a promising future on our hands. And it's going to be lots of fun watching more and more of these kids arriving onto the professional scene over the next year or so. But there's my reaction to the Blackhawks being ranked as the second best prospect pool in the entire NHL. That's the good news. The bad news is that they were also recently ranked as the second worst NHL salary cap position currently by Scott Maxwell of Daily Faceoff. I'll break down why I don't believe that's a fair assessment here in just a moment. But first, I do got to show some love to one of today's sponsors, which is FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And what I love personally about FanDuel is that it's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy now to your Sundays. With player props, same-game parlays, and more ways than ever to get in on the action. So are you ready to play? All you got to do is download the FanDuel app now or go and visit FanDuel.com today in order to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com, or go and download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to place your first $5 bet and win $300 worth of bonus bets when it wins. Before I get into segment 2, I have an important request for you all here real quick. Locked On wants to hear more from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and to also answer questions about our advertising. Go to LockedOnPodcast.com/survey right now to get started, and everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's LockedOnPodcast.com/survey. You can also easily find the link to the survey in the show notes for today's episode. Thank you all again for helping us all out. Segment 2 on today's episode, after the Blackhawks were given the second best prospect pool in the NHL by Corey Pronman, Scott Maxwell from Daily Faceoff, he's recently been ranking all 32 NHL salary cap situations, and I found it very peculiar to see the Blackhawks ranked 31st of 32 NHL teams, aka the second worst current salary cap situation in the entire league. So I definitely wanted to break that down and talk through it here on the show, and talk about why I don't think this is a fair assessment for the Chicago Blackhawks. Coming in at number 32, I will mention real quick, are the New York Islanders, who I talked about kind of kickstarted their rebuild in the first round of the 2025 draft by selecting Matthew Schaefer, Victor Eklund, and Kashawn Aitchison. Well, it's going to be tough for them to turn it around on the ice this year, considering they're filled with aging veterans on their books, with guys like Anders Lee, their captain, J.G. Pajot, Kyle Palmieri, Scott Mayfield on the back end, as well as Adam Pelech and Ryan Pulock, right? Like, it's been a core that's been there with the Islanders forever. And under Barry Trotz, that style of play with those guys, it got the job done for a little bit, but ultimately they tried to make it work for a little bit too long there. Lou Lamoriello ended up getting burned, and it's put the Islanders in a little bit of a tough financial situation, as they only have $1.6 million of cap space as of right now, and clearly do not have a roster that's going to be good enough to compete for a Stanley Cup playoff spot this year, unless something absolutely astonishing were to happen. So yeah, I understand having the New York Islanders ranked as the 32nd, ranked as the worst salary cap situation in the NHL right now. I don't understand the Chicago Blackhawks coming in at number 31, though, considering they have $18.7 million in cap space right here, right now. They have a ton of freedom. And while I do ultimately get that they have some bad contracts on their books, I don't know how you could look at this, this salary cap or their entire book and say this is an absolute nightmare. And I feel like Scott Maxwell, he did go on to explain in this article the reasoning behind some of these, really poor teams finding themselves down in the rankings, like the Blackhawks. The San Jose Sharks also find themselves ranked in the bottom 7 of current salary cap situations. I feel like in terms of the metrics and the data and whatever Scott Maxwell is plugging and chugging into his algorithm that spits out, analytical value, it's taking too much into account that these are teams that are so bad, they're not getting value from really anyone on their team. And they're also kind of purposely in this situation right here, right now. So I feel like that's weighted a little bit too heavily, and it needs to be recognized that the Blackhawks have some of these guys on the books with bad deals on purpose, and it's because of their situation. But I do want to point out here first, the opening paragraph of what Scott Maxwell had to say about the Blackhawks cap situation, I thought was kind of going against itself a little bit here. Was Maxwell saying, quote, "The Chicago Blackhawks cap situation is a good example of how just because it looks bad doesn't entirely mean that it is bad. A quick look at the deals they have signed, and you'll notice that there isn't a lot of value to be found. But this is what a team's cap sheet looks like when they haven't quite nailed down a core and are mostly just trying to hit the salary floor with the best players that want to join them," close quote. That first sentence, I think, kind of says it all. The Chicago Blackhawks cap situation is a good example of how just because it looks bad doesn't entirely mean it is bad. You could have just summed up the entire Blackhawks book right there. And I think that goes to show you why they aren't the second worst cap situation in the entire NHL right now, because it's there for a purpose. And I would also disagree against the statement that they haven't found a lot of things with value and they don't really have a core established yet. One, Frank Nazar, Alex Vlasic. I think Frank Nazar, that deal is going to age like a fine wine, and the value, while it might not be there right here, right now, I could see an argument for that. It's not going to be the case in just a couple of years down the road. Alex Vlasic undoubtedly is a core member of the future who I think is signed at a fantastic rate. And then re-signing Ryan Donato to a 4-year deal solidifies him as part of the core, even though he's going to have a different role in it in a couple of years down the road than he does right now. And at $4 million, I don't think there's any arguing against that's excellent value. And everyone else who the Blackhawks have hopes for that are going to be core pieces here just are still on their ELCs. They haven't reached those second contracts that are actually going to put substantial money on the books, like Connor Bedard, like Artem Levshinov, Sam Rinzel, Oliver Moore, Ryan Green, Ethan Del Mastro. We're still waiting on that deal for Wyatt Kaiser, Colton Dock, so on and so forth. And there's going to be more and more of those guys, considering the amount of NCAA and junior level prospects that are going to be joining on the professional scene in these next couple of years. So again, there's a reasoning behind the Blackhawks needing to shell out some bad money because they have so many young players on ELCs. And I get the next quote that Maxwell had here in terms of why he ranked the Blackhawks salary cap situation so poorly is, quote, "If I have one complaint about the Blackhawks current process, it's that they retain older talent a little bit more than the rebuilding team should. Sure, you want to have some veterans around to teach and support young guys, but Chicago often punts on selling high on these players and instead re-signs them, only for them to not continue putting up that value on the ice. Jason Dickinson, Ryan Donato, Nick Foligno, and Peter Mrazek are all examples of players that could have been traded when they had good value attached to them, but the Blackhawks chose to extend them instead." And I could understand that perspective. Yes, they definitely could have traded Jason Dickinson and sold high on him when he had that 20-goal season. And they could have, maybe dealt Nick Foligno for a middle round draft pick. They could have elected to trade Ryan Donato while his value was high right here, right now. But kind of like Maxwell said in that paragraph as well, you do need to have key veterans around to teach these young guys the ropes and to establish a good culture. And I think Jason Dickinson and Nick Foligno are two prime examples of that, both of which are on expiring contracts right here, right now, by the way. The Peter Mrazek one, I also kind of understand because the Blackhawks really didn't get anything in return for Mrazek. It was Joe Veleno, who they wound up swapping for Andre Burakovsky. So even that wound up working out okay. But also the Mrazek situation changed really fast, considering the Blackhawks likely didn't know they were going to be able to get Spencer Knight from the Florida Panthers until they got into those negotiations. And once they found out he was available and they could also kill two birds with one stone and get rid of Seth Jones at the same point in time, having Mrazek, Soderblom, and Spencer Knight all in the same goalie room wouldn't really have been good for anyone. So they give Mrazek an opportunity with the Detroit Red Wings, a team that he had played with previously. They kind of throw a veteran a bone there. They do right by him, which definitely doesn't get lost on by the guys in the locker room, especially the veterans who do want to consider joining on a rebuilding Blackhawks team. To know that you're going to be treated correctly and be handled properly in a trade situation, that definitely is worth something. So these critiques going against the Blackhawks book, I think they all have a purpose behind them, right? And it's not like the Blackhawks went crazy and spent far too much money putting themselves up against the salary cap with these veterans. They just kind of rewarded some of these core guys for really buying in and understanding what was being built here. And they certainly had the financial flexibility to give those guys a little bit more extra money. So to have the Blackhawks ranked at number 31, I just think is absolutely bananas here. The Boston Bruins were ranked 30th by Scott Maxwell. I agree with having them pretty down low here, considering they have no salary cap space, and I don't think they have a team that's going to be good enough to compete in the Eastern Conference. The Nashville Predators, I think they're a team that deserves to be down here. You can make an argument about the Minnesota Wild as well, and same with the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are ranked between numbers 25 and 32 by Scott Maxwell. But to have the Blackhawks and the San Jose Sharks, I think is two of the 7 worst cap situations in the NHL is rather foolish. I mean, I know teams like the Dallas Stars, who don't have any salary cap space, or the Vegas Golden Knights, or the New York Rangers, these are teams who are consistently winning. And I think that's valued a lot here in Maxwell's model. But I get the Stars have been competing for a Stanley Cup year in and year out for quite a while now, and that's the goal every season. But they're in quite a financial pickle at this time with Thomas Harley's going to need a new deal. They still aren't exactly sure what to do with Jason Robertson. Vegas, I mean, has been going through the ringer salary cap wise for every single season as a franchise. And now they're going to have an even tougher time getting by it, considering the CBA agreement, and you're going to have to be cap compliant going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think those are two teams who deserve to be on here, despite as much winning as they've been doing and how many good players they have on their books. I think those are teams who should be considered and put in worse salary cap positions than are taken into account here, and should be ranked lower than teams like the Blackhawks and Sharks, who purposely have aging veterans on their roster who are probably a little bit overpaid to get themselves to the salary cap floor. And I want to say even someone like Ilya Mikheyev, who you might say doesn't necessarily have the best value on his contract at $4 million. Well, the Blackhawks got him for free from the Vancouver Canucks. Same with Jason Dickinson. So I think that's something that needs to be in account here as well. I think, Andre Burakovsky, you could say he doesn't have value on his contract. Well, the Blackhawks got him for basically nothing in return from the Seattle Kraken. I would say the worst contract on the books that general manager Kyle Davidson has actually given out is probably the Tyler Bertuzzi deal, and that's only $5.5 million. I don't love the term. I think it's probably a bit too much at that length, but with the way the salary cap is going up, it's really not going to look that bad in a couple of years down the road. So there are my thoughts on the Blackhawks coming in at number 31, the second worst salary cap situation in the NHL right now. Definitely do not agree with that. But coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I close things out, still got to dive into the NHL Network's top 20 centers list. Segment 3, one final top 20 list from the NHL Network to go over here on the show. And I've already broken down the top 20 defensemen and the top 20 wings. So that leaves us with, last but certainly not least, the top 20 centers, which, like the defensemen yesterday, I think is pretty hard to rank. Probably not as hard as it is to rank the defensemen. I definitely think the wings was the easiest one to establish. But definitely another tough ranking here for the top 20 centers in the NHL. Let's dive on into it. No surprise at the top. Connor McDavid coming in at number 1 and Nathan MacKinnon coming in at number 2. I think that's how most hockey fans would probably have things ranked in the NHL. At number 3, the NHL Network had Leon Draisaitl. Right behind him at number 4, Alexander Barkov, 2-time Stanley Cup champion. At number 5, Sidney Crosby, despite getting up there, the guy never slows down, walks into a point per game every single season. Jack Eichel next at number 6. Austin Matthews, coming off of a little bit of a down year, dips to number 7. Braden Point up next at number 8. Mark Scheifele at 9. Nick Suzuki at 10. Jack Hughes at 11. Robert Thomas at 12. Sebastian Aho at 13. Nico Hischier 14, Dylan Larkin 15, Tim Stützle 16, Rupe Hintz 17, Tage Thompson 18, Macklin Celebrini 19, and Sam Bennett comes in at number 20. Not ranked, of course. Blackhawks stud Connor Bedard. Anze Kopitar also, I think, is, someone who's probably been a staple of these lists that didn't find himself inside the top 20 this year. I saw some people saying JT Miller deserves a spot, as does Wyatt Johnston. I think those are probably the most notable omissions from this top 20 list. As far as how I would personally go about things, I firmly agree McDavid and McKinnon at number 1, number 2. It's a really interesting question here at number 3 because Leon Draisaitl and how talented he is, the consistency, the production, the playmaking, and goal scoring. I know he obviously plays along with Connor Bedard, and that helps him take his game to another level, but he is probably the third most talented center in the entire NHL. But I don't know how you don't give Alexander Barkov the edge over him, considering what he's done in the playoffs last 2 years in that shutdown center ice role. Also chips in consistently on the offensive side of things. Big body. I mean, Barkey really doesn't do anything wrong on the ice, and not that Leon Draisaitl does, but Stanley Cups, I think, got to come into account here, right? So for me personally, I go with Barkov getting the edge over Draisaitl because he's got the edge over him in the Stanley Cup final the last 2 years. I go Barkey 3, Leon Draisaitl at number 4. And then personally, I'm going to go with Austin Matthews at number 5. I know it was arguably his worst NHL season last year for the Leafs, but still was over a point per game. The goal scoring, we know most years he's a shoo-in for 40, was on the precipice of scoring 70 just 2 seasons ago. So I think the dip was a little bit too much for me personally and Matthews. I go with him at number 5. I have Jack Eichel right behind Austin Matthews at number 6. It was really tough for me to sort between Matthews, Eichel, and Crosby. I think that's a tough 3 to rank right there. But even though Crosby, I mentioned the consistency is still there at the latter stages of his career, I think if you were just to ask me right here, right now, which players I'd want if I had to rank them right here, right now, I would go Matthews 1, Eichel 2, and Crosby 3. So that's why I have Matthews at 5, Eichel at 6, and Sidney Crosby at 7. I have Braden Point right behind Sidney Crosby here at number 8, an excellent forward for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and makes an impact in so many different ways. At number 9, I have Jack Hughes, who was ranked at number 11 according to NHL Network, behind Mark Scheifele, behind Nick Suzuki. I think that's absolutely crazy and some recency value that's gone a little bit too wild. Nick Suzuki is a great player. Mark Scheifele, awesome for the Winnipeg Jets these last couple of seasons and really has taken it to another level. But Jack Hughes is just more talented than those guys. I got no other things to say really about that. I think Jack definitely deserves to be in the top 10. I do have Nick Suzuki right behind him, though, at number 10. Number 11 for me might be my craziest ranking of the bunch, but I know the regular season, his point totals haven't necessarily been the highest, but A, they don't need to be at that time of the year, and B, when it matters the most, arguably no one shows up more than Sam Bennett. I thought number 20 was crazy for Sam Bennett, and again, kind of like the Draisaitl to Barkov conversation, there are probably more talented players at numbers 12 through 20 here on this list, but backs against the wall in a must-win game, Sam Bennett, I think, is one of the best center icemen in the business. So I personally have him ranked at number 11. I have Sebastian Aho, a player I think is super slept on, and even though maybe he hasn't gotten it done in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I just think his two-way play is excellent. I have him next behind Bennett at number 12. Mark Scheifele comes in at number 13 for me. Robert Thomas of the St. Louis Blues, I have at 14. Tim Stützle, I have next at number 15. He was number 16 in the regular rankings behind Nico Hischier and Dylan Larkin. I had to give Stützle the edge over those two, even though I think it's very close between Stützle, Larkin, and Hischier at this point. I have Stützle right behind Thomas coming in at number 15. Dylan Larkin coming up next at number 16. I moved Nico Hischier behind Larkin. Don't think he's surpassed him just yet, even though he's a great two-way center iceman. Nico comes in at number 17 for me. Just like the NHL Network's rankings, I have Tage Thompson coming in at number 18 for the Buffalo Sabres. I have Roope Hintz then dropping down from 17 as he was ranked according to NHL Network to number 19 on my list. And then rounding things out at number 20, even though it wasn't the strongest season for him and there was, a lot of chatter around his name and he obviously got traded, I still believe JT Miller is one of the top 20 center icemen in the NHL. And Macklin Celebrini, obviously is the younger of the two and has the brighter future and higher ceilings, but JT Miller has just been a staple, consistent force for a long, long time and was a 100-point player just 2 seasons ago. So to have him outside of the top 20, I think, considering we're not that far removed from that, it would be too crazy for me. So I do not have Macklin Celebrini coming in my top 20 centers list like the NHL Network did. At number 21, if there were to be a number 21, I think it definitely would go to Wyatt Johnston. He probably deserves to be somewhere on this list. Maybe he deserves to be there over someone like Rupe Hintz, considering how consistent he's been to start his NHL career, but just not the biggest body of work up to this point in time, but probably deserves to be in the top 20. I have Johnson just on the outside looking in. Macklin Celebrini, Connor Bedard, both on the precipice. Both are going to be members of this top 20 NHL centers list for a long, long time. In my opinion, neither deserve to be there right here, right now. But that's kind of the way I see the top 20 centers in the NHL heading into the 25-26 season. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks for free as well. That way, you won't miss out on any of the latest episodes as soon as they're available. Make sure to follow me on X at Jack Bushman too, and check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Till the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.